black hole. And joining us now live from Canberra to discuss the shock blowout in the deficit is Shadow Treasurer Joe Hockey. Good morning, Mr Hockey. Now, there's talk of $400 billion in deficits over the next 6 years. Extraordinary black hole. Can Australians afford this?
Well, no, we can't, Natasha, because our household borrowings are above those of comparable nations. And now the government is borrowing money on a scale that we haven't seen since World War II. You know, someone's going to have to pay all this money back. And it's not the rich or any particular part of the Australian community. It's everyone in Australia is going to have to work harder, longer, for less money. They're going to have higher interest rates, higher inflation, higher taxes because of what Kevin Rudd is going to do on Tuesday night.
And Mr Hockey, the Prime Minister's come out this morning defending this, saying Australia's debt will be the lowest of any major economy in the world for the next decade, and is defending it, saying it's a result of the current economic crisis and the collapse in tax revenues. What's your opinion with that?
Well, you know what, the Prime Minister would say that because he's not comparing apples with apples. If he looks at the household debt of countries like the UK and the US, Australia is higher than those households, and now the government is piling debt on top of the Australian households. The Prime Minister is not being fair dinkum with the Australian people about the real impact of what he is doing. And as for the collapse in revenues, the government has spent $80 billion in new initiatives since the last budget. $80 billion, and that doesn't include $43 billion for networking the nation and all those other grab bag of things. I mean, Australians must be disappointed that the Prime Minister promised to be a fiscal conservative, and now Australians, and for generations to come, are going to have a massive debt to pay off.
Do you think the federal government's so-called cash splashes have contributed to this deficit? And do you think, in light of the situation we're seeing now, was this responsible by the government to do that?
No, it was not responsible. It was irresponsible to hand cash to people. And I know there are people out there that were happy to receive it, but ultimately it's all borrowed money. And someone has to repay it, and it's you, the taxpayer, it's me, the taxpayer. All of us will have to repay this money. And Australians should be angry about this, angry that they've got a government that doesn't know how to control its spending on the credit card, because it is going to have a profound effect for years to come. It means not only that our own families will have to make huge sacrifices into the future, it will mean that our children have to make huge sacrifices. And why is it that whenever Labor gets into government, we have higher unemployment, we have bigger deficits, and we have more debt? Why is it the case that this always happens? So
would you argue then, Mr Hockey, if you were in government, we wouldn't be in deficit?
No, I would argue that we would have less of a deficit and less debt, unquestionably. We opposed the handout of the cash. We opposed it because it was the wrong policy at the wrong time. And importantly, we would be looking at ways to try and cut expenditure now so that you actually have some juice in the tank to try and get to your final destination, which is the prosperity and aspirations of our children. I mean, you know, the problem with this, Natasha, is that it's taking away the aspirations of people into the future. And as of today, it might not be apparent, but certainly tomorrow and well into the future, we are all going to have to curtail our aspirations because the Rudd government has left us with massive debt and a huge deficit.
All right, well, thanks for your time this morning, Shadow Treasurer Joe Hockey.